Hello, this is your host. Today's topic, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was born on January 30th, 1882 in Hyde Park, New York. His father was James Roosevelt and his mother was Sarah. James was a wealthy businessman and farmer, and Sarah was a homemaker. He had one sibling, a younger brother named James, who died in 1921. As a child, FDR attended the local grammar school in Hyde Park. He then went on to prep school at the Hotchkiss School in Lakeville, Connecticut, followed by college at Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he graduated in 1904. While attending Harvard, he pledged to the Delta Kappa Epsilon fraternity. In college, he met the love of his life, Eleanor Roosevelt, the first cousin once removed of his mother, whom he married in 1905. They had 6 children together, 2 of which died in infancy. The 4 that lived were Anna, James, John, and Franklin Jr. After graduating from Harvard, FDR returned home to Hyde Park. For a time, he worked as a surveyor, but his main passion was politics, which he got involved in after meeting some influential people from New York politics at his family's home. One of these men was future New York Governor Charles Paletti Whitman. When Paletti Whitman ran for office, FDR served as his campaign manager. FDR also began working for the Democratic Party, becoming known as a supporter of Tammany Hall, the powerful Democratic Party machine in New York City. In 1910, FDR ran for the New York State Senate, winning the election and beginning his political career. FDR served in the State Senate until 1913. After his time in the State Senate, FDR ran for and won a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. He represented New York's 26th district, serving from 1913 to 1921. While serving in Congress, FDR developed a reputation for being an effective legislator. In 1920, he ran for governor of New York, but lost to Republican incumbent Al Smith. In 1921, tragedy struck. FDR's younger brother James died and FDR contracted polio. Both events caused him to withdraw from public life for several years. During his bout with polio, FDR would receive treatment in various places, including at the home of his mother-in-law in the Beacon area. It was here that he would meet the woman who would become his closest advisor, mistress, and eventually close companion, Lucy Mercer. FDR's health slowly improved and he began to re-emerge into public life. In 1928, he ran for the U.S. vice presidency on the Democratic ticket with presidential candidate Al Smith, but lost to Republican nominees James S. Sherman and Herbert Hoover. At this point, FDR's political career seemed to be at a standstill. Then came the Great Depression. On October 29, 1929, the U.S. stock market crashed, causing the worst economic downturn in U.S. history. People panicked, businesses closed, and millions of Americans found themselves without jobs or homes. The American people desperately needed a hero, and their eyes turned to FDR, who gave a speech in 1932 that inspired many. This speech was titled, "I Agree with You." In it, FDR promised to do whatever it took to get America out of the Depression. The speech galvanized the Democratic Party and made FDR its presidential nominee. In the general election that year, FDR faced incumbent President Herbert Hoover. The American people wanted change, and they overwhelmingly voted for FDR. He carried 47 states and won by a landslide. FDR was inaugurated on March 4, 1933. At this point, no one could have predicted just how much change FDR would bring to the United States. FDR's first term was marked by the passage of a series of laws known as the New Deal. The New Deal was a series of programs and projects designed to help Americans out of the Great Depression. Some of the most notable programs created during the New Deal included the Social Security Act, the Works Progress Administration, and the Tennessee Valley Authority. With these programs, the federal government directly employed millions of Americans to work on infrastructure projects, put money directly into the pockets of those who needed it most, and provided a safety net for the elderly, disabled, and unemployed. These programs were wildly popular and helped to re-elect FDR in 1936. In his second term, FDR continued his efforts to help Americans out of the Depression. He also turned his attention to foreign policy. In 1937, FDR announced that the United States would no longer be a good neighbor to Latin America and would instead pursue a more active role in world affairs. This policy shift was in response to the rise of fascism in Europe and Japan. FDR also took steps to improve relations with Cuba and the Dominican Republic, which had been tense since the Spanish-American War. In 1938, FDR hosted the first ever Pan-American Conference in the United States. The conference was attended by representatives from all of the Americas and resulted in the signing of the Havana Charter. The charter created a system for resolving disputes among the nations of the Western Hemisphere. It also established the Pan-American Union, which later became the Organization of American States. FDR's efforts to improve relations with Latin America were praised by many. However, some critics argued that he was simply paying lip service to the region and that his policies towards Latin America were no different than those of his predecessors. In 1940, FDR ran for and won his third term in office. This made him the first president to serve more than 2 terms. Some people opposed FDR's third term, arguing that no president should serve more than 2 terms. However, others argued that FDR was elected in a landslide and that the American people had spoken. At the start of FDR's 4th term, the United States was still recovering from the Great Depression. However, the economy was beginning to grow and the stock market was on the rise. FDR's 4th term was dominated by World War II. In 1941, the United States entered the war after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. FDR led the country through the war effort and helped to secure victory over the Axis powers. FDR was well liked by the American people, and his popularity helped him to win a 4th term in office in 1944. However, FDR's health was beginning to decline. He suffered a stroke in 1945 and died on April 12, 1945. He died at his home in Warm Springs, Georgia. He had been working up until the day he died. Throughout FDR's presidency, he had 6 different vice presidents. This was because 3 of his vice presidents either resigned or died while in office. The first was John Nance Garner, who resigned after the 1932 election to protest FDR's opposition to the proposed bonus bill. The second was Henry A. Wallace, who was removed from office by FDR in 1945 after he gave a controversial speech. And the third was Harry S. Truman, who succeeded FDR when he died. So now, let's look at the 3 vice presidents who served with FDR for the full length of their terms. The first was John Nance Garner. Garner was a conservative Democrat from Texas who was popular with Southern Democrats. He was not a strong supporter of FDR's New Deal programs, and he often clashed with the president. However, he did support FDR's decision to enter World War II. The next was Henry A. Wallace. Wallace was a progressive Democrat from Iowa who was a strong supporter of FDR's New Deal programs. He also supported the president's decision to enter World War II. However, Wallace's relationship with FDR began to deteriorate in 1944 when he gave a controversial speech in which he criticized the president's foreign policy. As a result, he was removed from office in 1945. The last vice president to serve with FDR was Harry S. Truman. Truman was a moderate Democrat from Missouri who had previously served as a senator and as the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He was not a strong supporter of FDR's New Deal programs, but he did support the president's decision to enter World War II. Truman was sworn in as vice president on January 20, 1945, and he served with FDR for the remainder of his term. When FDR died, Truman became the 3rd president to succeed a sitting president due to death. Overall, FDR had a very successful presidency. He led the country through the Great Depression and World War II. He also passed many important laws and created many programs that helped to improve the lives of Americans. However, his legacy has been mixed. Some people view him as a great leader who saved the country from the Great Depression. Others view him as a tyrant who expanded the power of the federal government too much. Ultimately, it is up to each individual to decide how they view FDR's legacy. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment below to let me know what you thought. Also, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already so that you never miss an upload from my channel. I'll see you next time.